Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, good, thanks.
Um, I love the end of upload season three. So, like, I just want to get started by this will be a big question on everyone's mind. Do you know what happens to Nathan after episode eight?
I do not. I do
Uh,
not.
okay, so but going back to it, when you're coming into the end of the season, at end of season three, which you also did, I think, on the last season, The Boys, you directed the finale of that as well. So when you're like when you're given the unique position of being able to bring all these threads to you know a satisfying conclusion. What is your sort of approach as the director coming in? It's like all these things have happened. I just had to bring it home.
Well, it's always important to watch as much material that comes before you as possible. Really, I do that on any episode that I dive into, but it's particularly important on the finale episodes that you have a very clear understanding of not just reading the scripts, but like as much of the footage as you can see, what's come before you. That helps, of course. And then I would say the biggest challenge is that because the buck stops with you, production's literally going to shut down. Everything has to be firing on all cylinders and work out great because there's no opportunity for people to come back and get a pickup or do something differently. Oops, we missed something. There's a bit more pressure because you've got to get it all in the can before everyone shuts down and goes home.
Mhm. Awesome. And since you have like you're also in the show where it's like again, it's like the third season. So what's your relationship with the actors and your approach to giving them notes when they have been in these characters for 3, 4 years? And are you giving them different things, or it's just like what's on the page and you trust your instincts?
That's a good question. I think that anytime you're working on anything other than a pilot, the actors always know their characters better than you do, and that's okay. That's wonderful. And so we approach each scene with the with whatever's needed for that scene. But with that said, especially in comedy, you want to get different colors. You want to get different shades of gray so that in the editing room you can figure out, is this a moment that should be really big or is this a moment that should be more sincere? And so I always like to try to ask the actors to play with me and to exercise those muscles and give us lots of options. I think that's the most satisfying thing to do on set, actually, because it's so much fun. So we have a sense of what the scene should be, but even within that, there's lots of variety that each of these actors can bring to it. And then there's some ad libs too, which are really fun.
Yeah. And yeah, the cast is so good. And then there's this one great scene I think in episode seven between where Ingrid is pretending to be Nora, and then you get to let Allegra and Andy sort of play and then be like be in each other's shoes almost. What's your sort of direction in that scene? Can you kind of sort of break down the sequence? How you decide? Were they both doing the monologue and then you just cutting and pasting, or how's that all work out?
We were really aware of the likelihood that it would be intercut almost within a sentence, that one word would possibly be spoken by one of them and then the next word by the other, because that had happened a couple of times before. And so Andy was there on the day that we filmed Allegra in the bathroom, and she was watching very carefully to know just how Ingrid would say something. And then when we were there in the Lakeview scenes, she had a sense of what had happened and therefore what was likely, what she should be imitating. Um, Even to some physicality as well, like whether they lifted one hand or the other. But we tried to avoid those exact parallels because they don't necessarily apply between real life and the virtual avatars. Um, but anyway, yeah, so they were really had a lot of fun with trying to imagine each other doing it, and particularly Andy trying to imitate what Allegra would probably sound like as she was dressing them down.
Yeah, no, that was a really fun sequence. And then you have um since there are so many cliffhangers on the show, pretty much every episode ends on a cliffhanger, including yours. So, what sort of because I think the one in episode seven comes out of the blue almost right at the end when the bomb goes off. So, what's your sort of I don't know what's your sort of like method behind like nailing the cliffhanger where it's like we got to do all this stuff, get all the comedy, get all the drama, get romance out of the way, and then you can say, like the last 2 to 5 minutes, you're like, let's just wrap it up and build that tension.
Episode seven, yeah, episode seven had a very complicated ending, not only because of all the moving parts for things happening down in the plaza, things happening up in the lawyer room, but also because of the tone, right? It's a very difficult juxtaposition. Nathan and Nora are super happy. They've just found out that Nathan's going to be okay. And so they're elated. And yet, what's about to happen downstairs is this carnage. And it's a comedy in the end. So we didn't want to show the sort of guts and grossness too much because that becomes a little less funny. But the script did ask for that juxtaposition of these two very different tones. And so we talked about it in advance a lot. And I had some concerns about it. And then we tried to deal with that by being very particular about what we showed or didn't show downstairs outside. For example, we don't see the explosion. That wasn't just a practical budgetary decision, although it helped our budget, but it was purposeful because we don't really need to see a giant explosion. We just need to feel it and recognize that it happened and let the tone change from happiness to uh-oh in the end.
Yeah, and I was wondering the exact same thing. And then when you do get a chance to kind of like work with all these different genres, because you're working with comedy, then you have a little romance, then just drama, but then there's also like I think one of your episodes basically turns into like a courtroom drama almost. So how much fun for you is that as a director when you're like breaking down the episode, when you get the script and you're like, just like you get to work on a completely different show than what you may have envisioned when you first like signed up for Upload.
Yeah, well, so I was a fan of the show before coming to it this season, and one of the things I really liked about it was not only the intelligent satire, but the combination of pathos and humor. So my scripts were super exciting when I read them because I knew that I had all of these different opportunities, all these different balls in the air in terms of what you're saying, tone and just the style, the genre almost switches from scene to scene. So I don't know that I approached them any differently. Each thing exists on its own and has to be done to tell the story and to further the story. So the courtroom scenes are slightly bizarre courtroom scenes because you have something as, you have heightened reality where Ingrid, when she doesn't like being questioned, she gets up and walks away. Like that's both absurd and hilarious. So there's a comedy in the show that walks a fine line between something that's realistic and something that's surreal. And those are really fun to do on the day. We're laughing on set all the time. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, and then since it takes a long time to produce one of these episodes and because of all the visual effects, how much room do you give your actors to sort of improv and maybe come up with stuff on the spot, or do you guys try to stay on the page as much as possible?
It's not a heavily improv show. It's definitely written very carefully. There's writers on set that will pitch alternative lines if they think something could be funnier or if they think something may or may not be the best, may not be working. But by and large, it's scripted for sure, and that's partially because it has to be for all the visual effects, and you can't have people going completely throwing a curveball if you've planned for things to happen a certain way. But there are certainly opportunities for the actors to ad lib things often at the end of a scene. They're really wonderful actors, both in terms of their comedic chops and their ability to improv in character with things that resonate from scenes prior. Like they're very thoughtful about it. They don't just do it for a cheap laugh. They do it with an effort to be in character and to really augment what was already written. It's fun when it works, but they don't always do it. It's often exactly what was written.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also have, I think, a couple of times there are character interactions that you don't see as much focus on in previous episodes. I think there's that great scene between AI guy and Ingrid. So how much focus did you want to be like, since you're also a fan? So it's like, did you want to put, I don't know, what was your sort of approach to those kind of scenes where it's like, they don't get that many moments together, but let's make this moment count?
I love the scenes where the AI guy is showing his humanity, and that this season, that arc of the AI guys trying to be more human and having Zainab's character, to coach them in how to be more human. So yeah, to me, that was a really significant payoff, the scene in the elevator, where you see him legitimately moved that she treats him like a friend, and that he actually might have a friend. And those are earnest moments that are very sweet. And I think the pathos of those moments are one of the reasons why people love the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a little curious, like about behind the scenes where you are working on these shows like Upload and The Boys, which are all streamed, but like I've seen that you've also worked on like The Flash and stuff like that, which was on network. Have you noticed a difference in how the shows are maybe received or your experience on the shows, or is it relatively similar?
I mean, each of those shows is really different. I would say that the streaming shows will often just give you more time to make them, and they don't have a strict running time that you have to hit, so you can let certain things breathe a little bit longer, and not be so tied to hitting an exact running time and feeling like you're going to be pressured to cut the air out of every moment. So it can be really rewarding to work on the streaming shows for a lot of those reasons. But yeah, no, I mean, there are other network shows that are very successful at bringing really satisfying, entertaining stuff to life with their time and budget as well. So it just depends on how well written and how well acted and produced they all are. So I've been lucky to work on those kinds of shows.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so like when you're also doing all these visual effects for the show, and then there's the whole when they rebrand themselves at the end of episode 8 into beta, which is obviously Facebook did something similar. So it's um
Better.
what are sort of things that you kind of like sought, like since it's a futuristic world, you can also come up with things that's like maybe this is where things are heading, and it's like I want to incorporate that into my episode, even if it's just like a little running gag in that on like the TV or whatever. But what was your sort of approach to that, and what you kind of want to bring from your own sort of perspective?
So in terms of the beta and specifically the beta commercial was a pretty loose idea. And most of that was created in post with stock footage. A few specific shots were filmed for it, but both because we just had a massive schedule, a massively full amount to film in our schedule, and also because it was, as I said, the finale and the end, and everything was wrapping up. So it was clear that was going to have to be made largely in various stock footage and with some decisions made after the fact. But we knew the basic. Oh, and Greg has ideas obviously already about where the next season's going, so he did have a few specific desires, which I can't really go into because that does somewhat affect next season. But yeah, so there was both some loose marching orders, and then our understanding was it was going to be made in post, so we just had sort of placeholders for knowing that we would cut away and cut back, cut away and cut back, allowed us to do the big action stuff at Lakeview with a bit more of a free hand, knowing that we could cut away at any time.
Mm-hmm. And then so like Robbie has a lot on his plate in the show, and especially this season because he's playing the two different characters. I mean, they're the same character, but it's two different, like like I guess like a couple weeks difference in age. But so what's your sort of like when you're seeing him? And I don't think they share scenes in the episodes you directed, but when you're also like, I don't know, what's your sort of like conversations with him and how he's approaching it and working with just him tackling on this
So
leading
yeah,
role?
in my episodes, Robbie, so Upload Nathan and Backup Nathan were, Download Nathan and Backup Nathan were in scenes only in the handphone way, right? They weren't in physically the same place, but they were in scenes together, and it was really something that we talked about. Is Robbie's very aware of which character he is portraying in that moment, and they do lead different. They go down different paths, and so they are different people. And that's, I think, a really fun sliding doors kind of exercise for him. And he really had a nice two sets of roles to dig his teeth into. Yeah, because I think it's really neat to imagine, like, if you didn't have this experience, you would be a different person. And now that you have this experience and not that experience, you're going to live life a different way. So they are really different people actually by the end.
Yeah, and then there's that one great scene also, like when you're doing the compare contrast almost between when you open with um Nathan and or Robbie and Andy's in the bedroom, and then Allegra and Robbie in the bedroom as well. But so you see like the different relations and how they kind of. So how did you sort of want to, like when they're sharing their scenes, um, sort of differentiate those relationships and just show how they've evolved and different, how Allegra's also or Ingrid has evolved into a different person as well.
Well, it's really fun opportunity to sort of instead of it being a love triangle, which was season 2, now in season 3 we have this love, rectangle or love rhombus or whatever quadrilateral shape you want to pick. And so yeah, that allows for a lot more complexity and some jealousy, some competition, some comparisons. But it also allowed, I think, this season you to be more sympathetic to Ingrid because she really grew as a character in a nice way, I think. I mean, she still has her Ingrid ways, but the direction that she and backup Nathan could go really, I think, changed their relationship for the better and made that more authentic or more sincere, or whatever, in a way that was very moving. So.
Yeah, no, it came out really well because you're like a little dubious throughout the season, but she, they obviously she learned, so it's good. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Sarah. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Thank
And
you.
I can't wait for season 4. So hopefully you come back for that. Thank
Absolutely.
you.